This is the Matters of Influence podcast, creating awareness and alignment today to become your best self tomorrow. With your hosts, Debbie Frapp and Terry Foster Nowland.
Hello.
Hello, Terry.
Hey, Debbie. We have our special guest on with us today. We are, first of all, honored that Dr. Tim Elmore gets to join us today, and I get to introduce him. I get to be associated with Tim because of my husband, David, for lack of a better term. I came by that easily. However, we were introduced at one of the talks that Tim was actually doing in Tulsa. Tim, I can't even remember how far back that was. Had to be easy 10 years ago. When you had your book IY Generation that you were using as a talk. So we go back that far. Now I've got the opportunity to get to deliver some of his material in no near way that he can. So we want to have him on today, and I'm just going to read his little short bio because that's the easiest thing to do, right? So he's the founder and CEO of Growing Leaders, and it's an Atlanta-based nonprofit organization, and it was created to develop emerging leaders. We talk about emerging leaders inside of our organization all the time. His work grew out of 20 years of serving alongside Dr. John Maxwell, who Debbie and I know well. Yes. And he has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, USA Today, Psychology Today, and he's been featured on CNN's Headline News and Fox and Friends to talk about leading multiple generations in the workplace. And that's what we're going to talk about today. He has a best-selling book out now, and I have it right here on my desk. I keep it on my desk. You can't see it because of Zoom. New Kind of Diversity. And it's my encyclopedia, as he encourages us to use it. And what is it, Tim, 35 or 36 books now?
Well, 38, but who's counting?
38. He has 38 books now.
Wow.
And so we're excited to have him on here and talk a little bit more about how your teams can have a competitive advantage in the workplace by understanding the social science, as Tim talks about. And as we will reinforce over and over again, none of this is stereotyping. This is just understanding and having awareness around a really hot topic that's out there and why it's critical to all of us. So thank you, Tim, and welcome.
Oh my gosh, it's great to be with you. Terry, whenever you and I are together, or you and I and David are together, or you and I and Debbie are together, we laugh. We spend some amount of our time laughing at some goofball idea that we had. So anyway, thanks for letting me come and laugh with you today.
You bet.
Absolutely.
You bet. Hey, Debbie, why don't you start?
Okay.
We're going to question and go for it. I wish we had an audience because then we could do Q&A.
I know. And so I'll try to be both audience and interviewer. It is a fascinating topic, and I love your work. In fact, I read an article the other day, Tim, that you did around just what the new generation is looking for in leaders. And I know you've got this new book out. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about what inspired you to write this one specifically? I mean, 38 books. It's kind of like after a while, you're kind of like, if I'd said all the books, which is awesome. But tell us about this new one and what kind of inspired you to do this one?
Well, thank you for asking. Probably the best way to summarize it is we're in a day where we have all become very sensitive to diversity and equity and inclusion. Gender and race and ethnicity and income. And so we're all very careful with the language you use in the office or on a team. We don't want to hurt someone's feelings or anything. And all of that is so legit. But isn't it funny? You can make fun of a millennial or a Gen Zer, or a Gen Zer can make fun of a boomer, and it's okay for some reason. So it's the one category of diversity, at least in my experience, that it's still okay to not fully understand. We just throw all those, kids under the bus. They're all, fragile snowflakes or whatever. And so I decided I needed to create a sort of an encyclopedia where we really not only are better with each other, but we bring out the very best. And that's what A New Kind of Diversity, the book, is all about, is really pulling out the very best because we understand each other better. So that was my goal anyway with the book.
Cool. I love that. You know, it's funny because I've got my oldest granddaughter is 10, and I'm even noticing just, you know, just the differences, right, between how she sees me and the things that are going on in school these days. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So I think there's a need for it, not just in the workplace, but there's a need for it in our homes and with our families to understand where we're coming from and what it is that we're doing. And she's got a younger sister that is a year and 3 months. So in that family, they're going to have 3 generations just in that family, and then you've got me. So yeah, I definitely a need for it.
You're spot on. Think about a holiday family reunion, or if it's not a reunion, holiday time. You have grandparents, you've got great grandkids, you've got this, that, and the other. So you may have 5 generations in the house,
Right.
and we know to love each other and hug each other. But you know, Uncle Henry is in a wholly different world than nephew Jessica.
Yes.
And I have found, well, I had a CEO say this to me recently. I feel like I'm in a cross-cultural interaction with my newest team members because they have a different language, different customs, different values. It's like flying to China or whatever. So we're giggling at this, but I think we all know, it's a thing. So we've got to get this right. We just have to get this right for the future's sake.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Okay. I love the thing about the family. I wrote that. I'm of course taking notes. I have my pen in my hand. I'm always taking notes when we're talking to Tim. Now, you know, Tim, you say in the book, and I've heard you say it numerous times, that, you know, let's remember we started talking about this generational gap thing back in the 1960s, right? And over time, it's just widened. So, and like we just said, it's more challenging now than it ever has been. And there are a lot of factors that go along with that. So what would you want the listeners to like unpack or hear today from you as we talk about that part, you know, the gap and how it's gotten bigger?
Good question. Well, first, let me just reiterate, I believe the generation gap has been around for millenniums, actually. In the book, I even talk about Socrates, thousands of years ago, saying, kids today, they're disrespectful to their parents. And he said, they cross their legs. It's awful. You know, I mean, oh my gosh, if that's the worst of your problems, Mr. Socrates, you're in good shape. But here's my theory. The generation gap was definitely noticed by John Poppy, Life magazine editor, way back in the 60s, when the baby boomers were the new kids on the block. But the gap has gotten wider as the screens in our life went from public to private. So back when I was a child, and it was a long time ago, we had one screen in our house, and everybody knows it was a TV. It was a black and white TV. And we all gathered around and we watched a show together. We called it a program. You know, I Love Lucy or Dick Van Dyke or Andy Griffith or whatever. And we watched together, we laughed together, and we talked together about the show. Fast forward to today, we all have our own screen in our hands. And so our teenage son or daughter can be in a totally different world. So mom and dad might know that their daughter has an Instagram account. They have no idea she has 5 Finsta accounts, fake Instagram, where she's developed personas and she's talking to God knows who about who knows what. But we just couldn't do that back when I was a kid. There was a more of a merging together, and I was learning from my uncle and I was learning from my dad. So it does happen to a degree, but we're in our silos, are we not? We're in our niches. So in the book, we got to ditch the niche. We need to get with people from other generations, find out what their superpowers are, because my son, who's 30, has superpowers I do not have. So anyway, I just feel like, as cliche as that sounds, maybe that's a first step. Let's ditch the niche that we find ourselves in at the water cooler, talking to people that think like we do, vote like we do, you know, and we need to get with people that aren't like us. We'll just get better.
I'm cracking up. Debbie, I feel like this was that moment where we had the train in the background this past weekend. Like you said, Finsta. Okay. I'm going to be totally transparent. That's a new term for me. I'm going to throw that out there to my kids. But when you were saying having all these different accounts that our parents don't know about, I mean, for goodness sake, we had a phone on a wall with a 10-foot cord But the only privacy we got to go into the other room, shut the door and talk.
Yep.
And then if our time was up, my dad would hang up the receiver. He still had control, even though I was in the other room. So I don't know. Don't ask me what brought that to my mind. I had to bring it up. So Finsta, that's a new one.
No, I think it's so true. And let's talk about the workplace for a second though, Tim, because I think that that's really important in that we need to lead different as a result of this. So can you kind of talk about that a little bit in the workplace and us as leaders? What do we need to be doing here?
Yeah. Well, the phrase that we even chuckled about before we even started this recording today is we got to read them before we lead them.
Mhm.
So Cam is in my office. He's less than a year out of the University of Michigan. Sharp young man, but from a very different generation than I am.
Mhm.
I learn from him every time I'm with him, but I have to go in with a learning posture.
Sure.
So some of the research that's going to be in the second print run of this book, I sat down with a group of people from each of the 5 generations that are at work today: the builders, the baby boomers, the Xers, the millennials, and Generation Z. And I asked each group, what do you really want from the other generations when you interact with them? Well, you can imagine I got a myriad of answers.
I'm sure.
But 3 answers came up in every single group. And maybe this would be helpful for your listeners.
Yeah.
Every single generation said, would you approach me this way? Number 1 was with humility. So when we talk to somebody from another generation, we often have stereotypes in our head. This is a narcissistic, blah, 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 whatever. So when we approach with humility, we're approaching them with a spirit of, I know I have more to learn, and I could probably learn from you. So it's that posture of teachability and humility that doesn't feel like I have all the answers. I think the old need to practice that with the young. I think the young will do better if they practice it with the old.
Yeah.
Number 2, this one's predictable, but it came up in every single group: respect.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an old-fashioned word. Thank you, Aretha Franklin. But isn't it true, though? Let me just say this. I do better with my team, all of which are younger than me, when I start with respect rather than start with, you got to earn my respect, Sonny. Once you earn it, you'll get. No. Begin with belief.
Yeah.
Begin with the notion that they deserve every ounce of respect. And you know what I found? They reciprocate. They often give it right back to this old guy.
Absolutely.
So that's number 2. The third one I thought was really fascinating. It was the word curiosity. What would happen if every generation interacted with the others with a great sense of curiosity? I'm actually hungry to get to know you and to find out the intricacies and the superpowers, like I said. Oh my gosh, imagine a team that's got humility toward each other, respect for each other, and curiosity about each other. We may do something with that. So that would be where I would answer your question with that. If we could just do that, we're off to a great start.
It reminds me when Terry and I we got the opportunity to do a talk last week, and curiosity came up as one of the areas for leadership, and not only how to lead yourself, but being able to provide that environment of curiosity on a team. And I found this fact. I have no idea where it came from, so I'm just going to admit that. But it was like kids ask about 125 questions per day. Adults ask 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I was like, we all need to have that kid-like curiosity, to
True.
really and know that the humility comes in and that they've got something to teach me too.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And especially in today's world. So centuries ago, the young needed and wanted to be around the old because that was the only way you got any wisdom.
Yeah.
Well, today they have Google, Siri, and Alexa who are sharing information with them. Well, I say who? What? These gizmos are sharing information.
They are now human. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So, and then there's GBTs. So now this is out, which can write an essay for a kid in 1 or 2 or 3 minutes. And it's a little scary, actually. But here's my point. This is the first generation of kids that doesn't need adults to get information.
Yeah.
So I talked to a dad recently that said, I'm not having the same conversations with my teenagers that I had with my dad when I was a teenager. And I said, you can thank smart technology for that one. So we've got to be intentional about these conversations, and we need to practice reverse mentoring.
Yeah.
where an old and a young person get together. They swap stories. You can always find common ground when you swap stories. But then the old becomes a mentor for the young. Here's some timeless stuff I picked up on how to succeed in this company. But then they switch hats, and the young becomes the mentor to the old, where maybe he's sharing how the latest app could be used for marketing, or how we could monetize what I'm doing on TikTok or whatever. I just feel like that's the day we're in, and both are going to have to be learners and teachers for everybody else.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me just that we have so many generations in the workplace, and just the need for those three things. I think it cannot be underestimated or underutilized. We have to go there if we're really gonna thrive and work towards excellence. There's no other way.
Well, and you just bring up a great point. If we're going to thrive, I have found as I interact with people on this subject, we tend to default to, well, I just got to tolerate. I just got to tolerate them, those millennials, those 30-year-olds.
Yeah.
And I'm going, seriously, is that the best we're going to do, is to tolerate each other? That's like the bare minimum.
Mhm.
And so listeners, I'm sorry if I'm stepping on your toes, but we could do better than tolerate each other and to be frustrated with our teenagers at the house, when really we could be connecting right now and as learners and teachers. So maybe I'm describing an idealistic world that seems foreign to everybody, but I have found in our office, we have 4 generations, and I am learning all the time. But I walk into the room and I check my ego and my logo at the door, and I'm here to learn as well as teach. And you know what I found? When I'm learning, they want to learn from me.
Mhm.
It just is winsome and enticing and welcoming. If I'm a learner, they go, well, what do you have to say? And it's just how humans reciprocate. So maybe we get back to the fundamentals and we do better.
Agree.
Tim, I'm going to take you kind of back to the beginning. And honestly, for the people that don't have your book, which if they don't, they can go and order it, The New Kind of Diversity. But it's on, I opened it up so I could make sure I was on the right page, 32, 33 in the book with the big chart. You know, that's my favorite piece. I begged you for that chart.
Yes, you did.
I stalked you until I got that chart. Anyway, how many generations are actually in the workplace right now?
There are, well, it could be several more, but
Yeah.
typically there might be 5 generations. The builder generation would be way past retirement, but because people are working longer and living longer, they might stick around and still mow the lawn, or they may own the company at 78 years old. I mean, our president is 80 years old right now. It's just crazy. So there are 5 generations, but check this out, Terry. There are 7 generations alive on Earth right now.
Oh.
The oldest would be my Uncle Gene and Aunt Wanda. Uncle Gene is 99. He'll turn 100 years old this year.
Oh, wow.
And get this, he's still driving a motorhome on the streets of San Diego right now. It scares the bejeebies out of him.
Okay.
But then the youngest, which are not at work yet, they're children, but they're called the Alpha generation. And in the book, I have an appendix on the earliest research we have on those Alpha generation kids. If you stop and think about this, Deb, I know you're a grandmother. If you're a child who's 6 years old, half your life has been a pandemic, where you weren't socialized normally, or the academics of your life is probably behind, not because you're dumb, but because you weren't able to be in the normal classroom. So we're going to have to help these kiddos catch up, because I think they have so much to offer the world. But anyway, that's a long answer to a short question. There are 7 generations alive, 5 at work today.
And I constantly ask Tim, like, what more do we know about the Alphas? Because we do have the grandkids that are coming up, and that's who they are. And, you know, we're starting to hear things, Tim, like in some of the clients that we coach, business owners that we coach in their hiring processes, you know, they'll say, my gosh, they showed up great in the interview. And honestly, so what's happened now that they're in, right? And we're 90 days in, and it doesn't seem like the person that I sat in front of and said, this is a perfect match. And they're discovering everything from, man, they Googled the job and they knew how to act, say, dress, and behave to get the job, to possibly this idea of connecting, like you were talking about just now, the respect issue, instead of you're coming on board and this is how you're going to do things. And you have great stories about that.
Yeah.
But coming on board, and how can we learn from each other? What ideas do you have I need to know about? What more would you like to know about me? I think
Yeah.
that gap doesn't get closed. And there was a question we'd written down about what is one of the biggest challenges or discord at work or in leadership? Let's just use the word leadership.
Yeah.
Would it be that, or is there even something bigger than that?
Well, I have a chapter called How to Be Flexible Without Giving In. I'm assuming that most of the people that read the book are in the throes of their career and maybe in a decision-making role, like the two of you are. So I talk a little bit about, and I'll try to make this quick here. I talk about managing preferences, expectations, and demands. So those are three different items that we get confused about. Even a job interviewee can get confused about the difference between a demand and a preference.
Sure.
They're on social media and everything seems to be outrage, and we make something a demand and it's not a demand. So here's the difference. A preference would be a new potential employee coming in and you ask them, what would you like to see happen? A preference is I wish for this, but it's okay if it's not that way, but I wish for it. So it's good to find those out, because sometimes as an employer, you might go, oh, I think we can do that.
Sure.
Expectations are a little bit stronger. They would be, I'm expecting this to happen. I'm not in charge, but oh my gosh, I think conflict expands based on the difference between expectations and reality.
Amen.
So, yeah. So if I tell my wife I'll be home at 7 tonight for dinner and I get home at 7:05, not a big deal. I get home at 9:05, we're going to have a little conversation. And it's not because she couldn't live without me for 2 hours. I just formed an, it's so important for leaders to get this and say, let me right up front, Terry, you mentioned right up front, let's talk about this. And we can just make sure that our expectations are really close to reality. Both me for you, team member, and you for me, leader. But then this third one, demands. I am finding that Generation Z team members, and I love them, but they're coming in with just agency and audacity, like asking for more money, asking for more flexibility, asking for more perks and PTO and everything else. And sometimes employers it's off-putting because they go, you have zero experience, Austin, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But that's where I would say, and this is common sense, but I would say employer, interviewer, get that out right up front before you do anything deep like salary and benefits and compensation. If they have a demand and you cannot do that, you need to show them the door, wish them the best, and get on with your next interview, because it's just not going to be a culture fit, and nothing can be more toxic than someone you brought into the team and they don't fit with the team.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
No, I appreciate that. So what are some things, just as we begin to kind of wrap up, give us some practical things that, whether we're leaders or in the home or anything, to kind of close this generation gap that we may be either living with during the family get-togethers or at home, and either way that you answer it is totally fine, but give us some things that we can.
Yeah, well, I do care about the home, and I'm glad you guys are bringing that up, because I don't think we should categorize. We need to be practicing what we're talking about in our home with our spouses and our kids and our grandkids. And by the way, you look way too young to be a grandmother, I might add, but both of you do. But here's what I would say. I would say, first and foremost, let's go to work first. Normalize the communication mediums. I feel like a Gen Zer might come in saying, hey, you'll find my direct message on TikTok or whatever, and no, we're not doing that.
Slack. Just look on Slack.
Yeah, that's right. So we need to find out I'm not even saying what's right or wrong, but we need to get on the same page in terms of how we communicate. And you could even say, this is common sense, but we all need to make sure that we're on the same platform and medium to communicate. That would be number one. Number two, I would say, well, I really do believe in that reverse mentoring thing. So if you're on a team, listeners, and there are different age groups on that team, pair them up just for fun. Say there's no big assignment, but pair them up, go get coffee, but have the old and the young swap stories, and then begin to share what the other might know that you don't. It's just rich, 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 I think, especially in our day. So that would be another one. I really would go to the preferences, expectations, and demands as a step. I just think those are important to get out on the table. Those are very, very important. Let me take a couple of things that we do that's been really helpful. One is when we're about to market a new product or service, it doesn't matter what, get multiple generations in on the conversation. So with this new book, New Kind of Diversity, I asked Gen Zers on our team, how would we market it to your demographic? To boomers, how would we market it to yours? Millennials, Xers. And it was slightly different.
Yeah.
Because they're on, but that was very helpful. So we're trying to sell this product to different generations, go to the very people that are part of that demographic.
Yeah.
One other thing that I have found helpful, from time to time, we will ask our youngest team members that are not yet in leadership positions to attend a leadership meeting and to be there to not only soak it in, they'll probably learn about how we make decisions, but also maybe to weigh in. What does it feel like to be 25 and this decision was made for you? You have no say, no voice. It's just rich. And we always tend to learn from that 25-year-old as well as the 55-year-old. So I'll stop there. Yeah.
Because there's so much, honestly, there's just so much that you can learn, but I think you have to start by understanding what this is all about anyway. If you don't know anything about generational diversity and the science behind it, you need to read about it and understand it. I mean, how many times a week? I've already heard 3 new words this week. One I shouldn't say, I was told, because apparently I don't know what it means. Anyway, 3 new words. And I have to ask my kids who are, soon to be 34 and 33, okay, what did that mean? And the first thing they'll say is, you didn't say that out loud, right? Those kind of things. Debbie's seen it. She's witnessed that with me. Same with songs. And David and I laughed. In fact, when Tim and David and I were on a Zoom a few weeks ago, one of the things we talked about was, the new term is mid-century modern for decorating. And David's like, you mean that stuff I grew up with that was in my house and on my, right? It's just, everything's got a new term. So
got a new name. Yeah.
We've got to learn, we've got to be willing to be open to what language means. What do words mean even anymore? Because there's a lot of thinking that goes into this.
Yeah.
I think you nailed it, Terry. We have to be willing to be open, and that's everybody. And yet it starts with yourself.
Yeah.
If you're not going to be open, there's no way you can influence, the family and those at work. And you and I coach leaders. And so we want to make sure that we're influencing those too. And we definitely learn from them. I think Tim, Terry, and I were the oldest ones at this conference last week. And they learned from us. And I promise you, we learned from them.
Or they cried. We think we might have put the photographer to sleep. We're not.
We might have. So, but I do think that it begins with us and being open. And your work is it's so critical. And I love the fact that you're also with your nonprofit organization, growing new leaders, that I know that all of this is going to be such a part of. So thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for your time today. And guys, you gotta, I remember the first time that I met you, Tim, and I don't remember the location. It may have been Atlanta. We were at a conference, and it was with one of your first books. Well, now that you've gotten 38, it might not have been your first one. It was the first one I was exposed to.
Okay.
And just great content and information. So any last final thoughts, anything that you really wish we would have asked you that you need to close with?
Well, Terry, I'm glad you brought up that chart. That really is the part. If you read nothing but 2 pages in the book, it's a spread of the 5 generations that are at work and their approach to technology, the paradigm they enter the workforce with, their view of authority, which is totally different depending on the. I do. It's not a push for the book here, but I just feel like that would even give you in 5 minutes just a quick, oh, no wonder you said that. Look at how you were raised or what you were experiencing growing up, and it shaped you. Absolutely. Oh, I will say one more thing. There's a free assessment.
Yeah.
Might be fun.
Okay.
So if listeners went to newdiversitybook.com, you'll see the book, obviously, but there's a place you can click and take a free 41 question assessment. where you'll get a report on, oh, you're pretty savvy with millennials, but not with Gen Z, or whatever.
Oh, cool.
So
Okay.
it's kind of fun. Yeah.
That'd be great. We'll make sure that we put that in our description too, for this podcast. Those of you listening, make sure that you check that out. So
Yeah.
you got anything else you want to wrap up with?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on. It's so fun to talk to both of you.
I want to challenge everybody I'll do it. Tim won't. Get the book, take that chart if you do nothing else, and sit around with your family and talk about it. We have laughed. I've laughed inside of the classroom with people. I've got an office that has asked me to come back for a third time and to continue this talk as they brainstorm. And it's just an interesting topic in a world where there's so much going on. And I'm excited about it. And I failed the assessment more than once. Anyway, so just saying.
Awesome.
Terry, let me say this. One thing I appreciate about you is you are yourself. You're so open about not knowing a word or not knowing a new term or whatever. And I love that. That makes you winsome to any generation, because at least you are who you are. And
I can't change it.
That
I
is
wish
true.
I could change it.
That's why we're your friends. So
That's why we're friends. That's
all
right.
right, guys, we'll close this out here. Here we go.